Hello, everyone. This is Rick with the Cyber Pro podcast. Super excited for today's guest. Gary is a great guy. You guys will love him by the end of this podcast if you don't already know him. But remember, it's 5 questions in about 9 minutes because hackers never sleep. So let's get to it. Gary, who are you? I know who you are. And what do you do?
Well, the best way to answer that great question is I'm the Forrest Gump of cybersecurity, because during my last 5 years of my incredibly improbable journey, including the privilege of being with you, Rick, and with your audience, is that like, why am I here? How did this happen? And to make an incredibly long and complicated story short, up until recently, I knew nothing about this stuff, nothing about cybersecurity or technology or anyone in it in any way, shape, or form. Nothing personal, but I failed algebra twice. So what am I doing talking to cryptographers and all these thought leaders and these genius people? It's nuts. And how I got here is I was the CEO of a marketing communications company that I started with my wife, went great for about 10 years. We were fortunate to sell it to the largest company in the world in marketing communications, 49% of it. And shortly thereafter, I became victimized by some insiders who essentially cloned my company right under my nose. Same corporate identity, same everything, except they spoofed the website. They redirected telephone calls to their exchange. They did a whole social engineering campaign calling my biggest clients like General Motors, AT&T, Procter & Gamble, saying that I was under investigation by the FBI and to cease communications with me. It was nuts. Like no one would believe it. Anyways, kind of unable to receive justice due to the difficulty of attribution and obfuscation, even though we knew who it was. I had to close the company, and it wasn't just me. I had to lay off about 100 people, and it was incredibly devastating in my life, in the lives of these people as well. So we moved on. I worked for a number of years on veterans causes. I was the executive director of something called the Anthem Project, which is an initiative to help veterans reintegrate back into civil society after, being in theater. And then my wife and I started a children's education program. Coming to modern times, just about 5 years ago, just to put food on the table because I had lost everything and I incurred a lot of debt, that we had to pay back that wasn't mine. We decided to see if I could re-enter the ecosystem that I had left 10 years prior, because I was very well known and kind of famous for data analytics and stuff that we did at that time. So I put the word out. I was really fortunate because I was invited to give a keynote speech. Went great, got this big stack of business cards, about marketing. Hey, Gary, you still doing these great reports and, so on and so forth. I came home, tears of gratitude streaming down my face. Valerie, look, we're back. Phoenix rising from the ashes. And then the next day, guess what happened?
Oh boy.
Boom, 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 boom. The attack started again. My head almost exploded. I said, you're kidding me. There's no way someone would start 10 years later, the same things that they did before. But my first little indicator of compromise was my LinkedIn account was hacked, and a lot of my contacts were deleted, not by me. And then all in all, there were 19 attack vectors that we were able to document, including these crazy things like 36 people attached to my car, listening to my conversations, according to OnStar. And so I knew no one would believe me. So I decided I wouldn't even call it forensics. I bought a book called Cybersecurity for Dummies, the yellow book with the black stripe, and thinking, okay, great. I'm 59 years of age. There's no way I'm going to learn about DevSecOps or, so I got a book. 10 pages into that book, I was lost. So rather than quitting, I found the company that put it out there, Palo Alto Networks, and a great guy, the CISO there, Rick Howard. And I told him that, and he starts cracking up. So I'm sitting here laughing, having lost everything. And finally I said, may I ask why you're laughing so hard? And he pauses and says, well, it's not really for beginners. Then why do you call it Cybersecurity for Dummies? And that's when I realized there had to be a better way to distill complicated technology information into something people could get their heads around at least a little bit. Superhero comics, and here I am.
Gary, I love this story. I've heard it multiple times. Obviously, we've worked together in the past, and so I can't thank you enough for sharing that. And as a veteran, I know that you've done some cool things for our vets, so I appreciate that. I'm humbled by that as well.
Thanks for your service.
Thank you. So let's jump into another question for you. I'm really curious. What do you love about being in the cybersecurity industry now, right? Normally we talk to folks on the Cyber Pro podcast who would be considered an expert, but you are the epitome of the non-expert.
I'm not an expert.
But yet you have really driven yourself into this industry in such a great way. So what does that feel like? Why do you love doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I have a really concrete answer to that, which is I was referencing earlier that I took photos and screenshots and videos of things that to me just seemed anomalous, which I would never call forensics. And just as a way to store them, I put them in a PowerPoint presentation with no intention of showing anyone. Well, part of my Forrest Gump, I was invited to give a speech at Gartner's Security Risk Management Conference in Washington, with my, air quote evidence. And I've been a professional presenter for my whole career, never get nervous. But for this one, I was shaking in my boots because these people could call BS. I mean, I'd be showing them stuff. No, you didn't patch, or blah, 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 all this stuff. And I would just be blown away. So I went and I gave this presentation, and guess what happened?
They loved it.
I got a standing ovation, and maybe 35 or 40 people were waiting in line to ask me about some of the vulnerabilities that I showed. And this is before like Bluetooth vulnerabilities were widely known, Thunderstrike, peripheral problems, routers, being hacked, chip vulnerabilities. It turns out that the people that did this to me are incredibly sophisticated people. And so the reason I love cybersecurity in this community so much is I found a home.
That's awesome. And we're glad you found that home, because I know your voice has resonated quite a bit. Cybersecurity is a top concern, right? I do air quotes there because it's different for everyone, but what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, well, it has two meanings to it. Number one is I've been hacked so many times. And since I've been out there in this very visible way, I have 23,000 connections on LinkedIn with the most important people in the world, in cybersecurity. Like you would not believe it. What am I doing talking to generals? I mean, come on, so I'm concerned in that way, just for my own life and people whom I love. And I think the other, kind of top concern in cybersecurity is it's too complicated, for most people to get their heads around, there's a third piece that I would add to it, which is, I'm concerned that the only time people hear about, and this is a big one for me, informs my mission. The only time that people hear about cybersecurity is when the criminals win. And so I said, not anymore. So our mission is to shine the light on the unsung cyber heroes who toil in anonymity at work, at home, at school, to keep us safe.
No, that's amazing. And I appreciate that. What insight do you want to share with us? Because you have such a great mind around the industry, but like you said, you're not technical. So I would love to know, what piece of insight do you want to share with our network?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question too. I've learned a little bit of many, different things, and the people with whom I'm privileged to listen and learn from on our show, and in all the conferences and stuff that I go to are deep. They're like your audience. They know what this all is and isn't, and to me, I think one of the insights is to say thank you, that you all work in a thankless industry. And it's a relentless industry, and you need to be elevated, I think, and to be acknowledged for what you do, because of what I said earlier, that the only time you hear about this stuff is when the bad people win. So that's my key insight, to say thank you. And I want all of the audience to feel empowered and motivated that what they do matters.
Gary, what's your favorite piece of retro technology that makes you smile?
My laptop right now.
You're laughing about it. I don't know if there's anyone
in the audience that wants, to hook me up with, I need a new laptop, a router. My stuff sucks.
So it makes you smile because it's so bad and you're just sitting there going, ugh.
Well, but there's actually an operating principle going on there in support of what you're saying is, this industry, as everyone knows, is based on fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or FUD, which would be a great superhero character, by the way. So my mission is to pivot the community from FUD to fun, and to acknowledge the seriousness and the importance, and there are things to be afraid and uncertain and doubtful about, but we can also have some psychological air to breathe and look at the lighter side of things where possible.
Gary, thank you so much for being on the Cyber Pro podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You did it. You made it to the end. Thanks for watching the Cyber Pro podcast. Check us out for more content.